Make sure your vote really counts. Don't let regret guide your decision. Have you ever regretted your choice? Think about it. Regret is a fundamental element of decision making. After all, life is full of choices, and many of them are uncertain ones. The one who got away, the job you didn't take, the money you didn't save, the fight you wish you hadn't had. There's always going to be something that you wish you'd done differently and therefore regret it. For many, this regret can be debilitating as they tell themselves, I never seem to make the right decisions, or I always choose the wrong thing for me. For these folks, it's as if they are always looking in the rearview mirror at what they have left behind. Psychologists have long wondered about the value of regret. It seems like it just makes us feel worse, but regret on its own is not altogether bad. In fact, it can spur us to action. It can help us make better decisions in the future. It helps explain why things happen and what we could have done differently to avoid them. When we are in that moment of making a decision, we all tend to believe, and sometimes even insist, that we know exactly what we're doing. That certainly can be said when it comes to the act of voting, when we ignore the red flags, even though our gut is telling us something isn't quite right about a candidate, despite everything looking hunky dory on the outside. This is more common than we may have imagined. Studies have shown about 28% of voters, on average, regret voting for whom they voted. This finding wasn't as a result of a single study or two, or even a couple of elections, but from research in 5 different countries after 11 regional and national elections. This research revealed that those who experienced the strongest feelings of voter regret are those who have been either misinformed or didn't vote their gut feeling in the first place. Obviously, 28% of the electorate regretting their vote, basically getting it wrong, would have a significant effect on whether or not the best qualified candidates are being elected into office. But aren't there an equal number of regretful voters for each candidate, you might ask? Wouldn't they just cancel one another out? For example, 28% of voters for candidate A will regret voting for candidate A, and this will be offset by 28% of voters for candidate B who regretted voting for candidate B. So isn't it a non issue? No. Turns out it's a big issue. That's because the research shows that the most well funded political candidates who garner a disproportionate share of the voters who end up regretting whom they voted for. And just because they're well funded doesn't mean they're well qualified. So maybe this better explains why year after year, so many well funded but often unqualified, unprepared, and unremarkable so called leaders are elected to public office. Could it be because these better funded candidates literally own the demographic of voters that are the least informed? And that will be the most likely to look past the red flags of a particular candidate running for office? Perhaps. But the trouble is that none of us live on an island, and the least informed voters aren't the only ones regretting their votes. We all end up living with the regret of the least informed among us as our communities crumble, mirrored in debt in the meantime. You see, the 28% of voters every election cycle who regret the candidate for whom they voted is very significant because we are only as strong as the weakest link. It's incumbent upon all of us to study the candidates and understand what's at stake before we regret not doing so. As early voting begins this month on September 28th, we must not reduce our most important civic duty to merely following the herd off the cliff. We've done that for far too long, and regrets are just about all we have to show for it.